Hi, this is Teresa Bennett, the Analyst Coach, and in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at BA mindset. And you may be wondering why I even want to talk about mindset and what does that have to do with your job as a business analyst. And that is really the question that I want to answer for you in going through this presentation. First, we're going to talk about energy. What is energy and how does it apply to your job as a BA? So the definition in the dictionary of energy is intensity or vitality of action or expression, forcefulness, capacity or tendency for intense activity, vigorous or intense action, a source of power. Those are all definitions of energy. Now, what does that mean to you? Ever notice when you walk into a room full of people that you sometimes get a good vibe or a bad vibe? If you say, no, I don't notice that, that's okay, because I didn't used to notice it at all. I just kind of plowed through my days and I wasn't aware of that energy around me. But once I learned how to be aware of that, it helped me with gauging people and where they were at. So it's definitely something that I would try to get used to doing is kind of focusing on that energy in the room. A requirements meeting has one goal, one purpose, right? It's eliciting requirements for the project, and that is it. We get caught up in other things sometimes in the meetings, but that truly is the one true goal of it. So how does energy affect your requirement sessions? Do you believe the energy of the room can affect that goal? Have you been in a good mood, had a good day where things are going great, and then you have an encounter with someone that's mad or upset or stressed or even sad? And then you think about how that affects you. You know, does it change your mood? Does it bring you down a little bit? You know, you're all happy and excited, having a good day, and then somebody else isn't having such a good day, and maybe they take it out on you or they're venting to you about it, you know, whatever the case may be, it kind of lowers your mood, if you will. The energy in the room is going to dictate how successful your meeting will be. If you have more people in a bad mood than in a good mood, then the room is going to shift to a negative energy. You'll find that people are pessimistic, they're argumentative, they're closed to ideas. If the majority of the room isn't paying attention to the discussion, then discussion is going to grind to a halt and you're going to find yourself doing all the talking, which is bad for business, right? We want the people from the business to do most of the talking. We want to facilitate that conversation. We want to ask questions. We want to get them thinking about different things, but we should not, as BAs, be the ones doing all of the talking. If you have more people in a good mood than in a bad mood, the room's going to shift to a positive energy. So people will be optimistic, they'll be positive, and they'll be open to ideas. If the majority of the room is paying attention to the discussion, then discussion is going to grow. People will make suggestions, they'll listen to others, and you'll find yourself doing less of the talking, which of course is good for the business, right? So those are ways that the energy of a room can affect your meeting. So how do you know if the energy is bad? I just told you how it could affect your meeting, but how do you know it's bad? Especially if you were like me and just kind of went through your days and didn't pay attention to that sort of thing. Observation and awareness are key, and that's it, really. You have to start being aware of it. How do you feel? Do you sense stress when you walk in the room? Does it seem relaxed? Are people making small talk, or is everyone staring at their laptops and there's no one talking? And then, is that happening because they're just busy? People are just kind of wrapping up what they were doing? Or is it because they're being closed off and they're not open to conversation? Take a few minutes at the beginning of the meeting to speak to people before jumping into the topic of the meeting. Make eye contact and smile at each person. Ask how their weekend was if it's a Monday, or ask how their day's going. And then see how many people responded. And what was their response? Was it a positive one or a negative one? So what if you figure out the energy is negative? What can you do about it? Do not follow them down into the pit of negative energy. Don't get sucked in. You have to be able to keep yourself in a positive place. I like to think of energy as anything that invokes a reaction inside you. In other words, anything that makes you tick, ponder, feel, or react. Energy comes to us in different forms. The chair you're sitting on right now, the music you're listening to, or the book you just finished reading are all going to provoke some sort of reaction within you. So do the people that you speak to. And that's related to their energy. Take music, for example. How does your favorite song make you feel? What type of energy do you enjoy most from music? If you don't know what I'm talking about, then dig into your iTunes right now, or, well, not right this minute, right? Wait till after the webinar, and put on a song that you really like. Close your eyes for the entire song and see what you feel. Music is one of the most powerful and recognizable forms of energy, which is probably why it's grounded in so many sacred traditions. A powerful musician can really create the same sensations in many different people. So you can have 10 people, obviously all 10 standing there are different, right? They have different personalities. They've had different experiences in their life. They are different people. But that musician, if he's good, can create the same sensations in all 10 of those people. So that's why I like to think of energy as related to music. Now, I asked the question, what can you do, right? Our last slide was, what if the energy is negative? What can you do about it? Well, number one, you can run screaming from the room. And I'm just kidding, right? You don't really want to run screaming from the room. But a lot of people really think of energy as a spiritual term, kind of like the divine energy of Christ, Buddha, or Krishna. It isn't really an otherworldly concept. It's something that we create in our day-to-day activities. And positive energy is contagious. When you constantly take in the positive energy from your surroundings, then it's going to be visible to the outer world. So I want to give you an example of that. My friend Sylvia is so present that she radiates positive energy in everything she does. Everyone loves being around her. They feed off her energy. I've had people tell me multiple times that about Sylvia just, making their day, or making them smile, or just simply making them feel good. The best piece of advice I can share in terms of this is to be fully in the here and now. To make room for the positive energy that is available in this moment, you'll need to release negative energy that you're holding on to from the past, whether that is distant or recent. It could be that you had a disagreement 10 minutes ago with the PM on your project, or the soda machine ate your dollar for the umpteenth time, and now you don't have any money and no soda, right? And that's frustrating you. You walk in the room and you're in that, that place of frustration. Or it could be a fight with your spouse or significant other that happened, 2 weeks ago that's still weighing on your mind. You need to focus solely on this moment, right, when you're in the meeting, and ask yourself, what about what I see in front of me makes me feel good? And if you don't see anything that provides that feeling, then figure out how else you can access it, right? How else can you kind of bring to front that good feeling so that you get rid of the negative feeling, right? If the other people in the room are negative and you're negative too, then you're just feeding into their negativity, right? So if you're in a bad mood, in other words, you're creating or adding to the negative energy in the room, then you won't be able to turn it around, and your meeting is not going to be productive. And even worse, it could even set the tone for the remainder of the project. And if you have months to go, you do not want to feel like this heavy weight is on your shoulders the entire time of the project. If you are conveying positive energy, then other people are going to pick up on it and they're going to follow your lead. So again, don't allow yourself to get sucked into their negative energy. You want to suck them into your positive energy. Make sense? Now let's get into mindset. So Again, we want to take a look to just ground us on what is mindset. Mindset contains both intellectual and emotional elements that affect our perceptions, interpretations, and actions. They guide what we think and how we feel about people and things. Mindsets are formed by a combination of organizing models, values, beliefs, preferences, and attitudes. Because actions are typically based on a person's thoughts, feelings, and priorities, most behaviors have a mindset behind them that is used to justify the behavior from the person's perspective at the moment. We're going to focus on only two elements of a person's mindset. Frame of reference, which is the way an individual makes sense of situations, and priorities. In other words, the relative importance and value of various options. Each individual has a unique way of interpreting the world. Some people are optimists, others are pessimists. Professional background, past experiences, education, etc. all influence a person's viewpoint. The combination of all the various parts of an individual's interpretation of the world makes up that person's frame of reference, right? It's their all of those things kind of put together is what's being used as a frame of reference to determine what their mindset is on certain things. A person's frame of reference guides his or her attention, goals, and actions in any given circumstance. Should I eat lunch or exercise? Return this phone call or send an email? Take the time to raise this issue or let it slide? The choices people make are reflections of the things they see as the most important, meaning their priorities. What is important to them may be temporary in nature, right? Might be related to a specific goal or reflect a longer-term perspective, which is more related to their values. A person's unique mindset is indicative of that individual's personality traits. When groups of people share frames of reference and priorities, it reveals aspects of their culture. In either case, mindset leads to behaviors that support them. Because of this, BA practitioners must be able to reshape mindsets as part of navigating important business transformation. Within organizations pursuing major change, the first step in attempting to shift someone's mindset is to be clear about the intent of the initiative and then to identify the frame of reference and priorities required to support that outcome. So here's an example. A company wants to move from having transactional relationships with its customers to building extremely strong customer relationships. To do this, it's necessary for employees to share a customer-centered mindset. Employees have to begin viewing the people they serve differently and making different choices in their interactions with them, or nothing of substance is really going to change. So this means that two things are important. It's essential to understand both the desired future frame of reference as well as the current frame of reference to gain a clear picture of the magnitude and nature of the gap that must be closed. It's also critical to articulate what should become more important or less important than it was in the past, right? What are the priorities, which may have been XYZ 2 weeks ago, but now our priorities are ABC. So that has to be defined. Reframing, right? We talked about how we have to change that person's frame of reference, right? So that they can be open. So reframing is the reshaping of a person's frame of reference and related priorities to shift how that person sees and interprets certain things. We can't force people to change their mindsets in support of successful implementation of an initiative. However, there are steps we can follow to significantly increase the likelihood that a different perspective is going to unfold. Reframing involves focusing a person's attention on the same information previously available, but helping him or her view it differently so the implications can be recalibrated. Excuse me. Through reframing, new options are made possible that would otherwise not be feasible or even acceptable to the person. Reframing requires that the change practitioner, which by the way is you, the BA, be willing and able to do 5 things. address the context as well as the content of interpersonal communications, redefine the other person's frame of reference in a way that sheds positive light on the successful implementation of the change at hand, reset the person's priorities, respond effectively when the person reacts to the reframing attempt, and confront the person with the real price that it takes to achieve success. In other words, what is the real price in order for this project to be successful, whatever that project may be. Did I skip a slide? Hang on a second. Nope. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, so communication between people always occurs at two levels. First, the content level, which is the message one person is attempting to convey to another. Think of this as the coded transmission. And then context level, the frame of reference used by the sender to interpret the message. Think of this as the code book. When one person attempts to communicate with another, it's often done without knowing the receiver's frame of reference. When this occurs, the sender conveys a content message that can be understood and accepted only from the sender's own frame of reference, not that of the receiver. This is called one-step communication, and it looks like this. So you have the sender's frame of reference, the sender talks, the receiver listens, and then the receiver has a frame of reference, and to them, that message may be unacceptable, right? Because it was put in a way that is the frame of reference of the sender, not the receiver. Reframing involves modifying the receiver's frame of reference before the content of a message is conveyed. By first reshaping the receiver's context so that the receiver is going to understand the situation as seen by you, the sender, or whoever the sender is, the sender's message will have a greater chance of being accepted. That requires a three-step communication approach. And here's what that looks like. So step one would be, let's assume that you're the sender, right, for the sake of this scenario. So you as the sender would identify the receiver's frame of reference, right? So the receiver is going to talk, you the sender is going to listen, right? You're going to ask them some open-ended questions so that they're talking, right? You're figuring out what their frame of reference is. Then based on that, you as the sender are going to shift the receiver's context by reframing the frame of reference, right? So you want to describe a new frame of reference for the receiver, and we're going to get into that here in a second. And now, when you send that message, right, when you send that information to the receiver through the words that you're speaking, they have a higher likelihood of accepting it because you've now helped them change their frame of reference around the subject that you're talking about. Reframing skill number 2 is the ability to redefine the other person's frame of reference, right? So this is what we were just talking about, how you have to be able to redefine their frame of reference. A person's frame of reference is made up of 6 components. You can foster a shift in someone's frame of reference by applying at least one of them, sometimes more. So let's take a look at what those are, those 6 components. First one is definition. Second is history. Third is meaning. Fourth is purpose. Fifth is expectations. And sixth is requirements. So definition means a depiction of how the situation could be viewed in order for the change to appear more desirable. Often the way a situation is defined limits the range of solutions. For example, is the person facing an opportunity, a problem, a dilemma, or a hassle? How are you going to word that? History, an explanation of events leading up to a current situation that allows the change to appear more viable. If certain factors from the past are not identified appropriately, the desired effect may not be achieved. So again, have a little conversation. Figure out what those factors from the past are. Meaning, an interpretation of key events, circumstances, or information that shows the change has more benefits than were previously apparent. Purpose, a description of what a person wants to achieve that supports the need to change. For example, people often do not realize that their true agenda is not to find a solution to a problem, but to vent anger, protect their turf, or achieve some other goal. Expectations, or portrayal of what could be anticipated that would justify the change. Requirements, clarifying what it will take for the desired outcome to be accomplished. Many people feel they cannot commit the resources required for change. However, a more complete understanding of the cost for not changing may make the cost of change seem more affordable. So these 6 components make up the interrelated aspects of a person's view of an event or situation. So here's some examples of how these framing components present themselves and how you can reframe them. So what we're going to look at here is each of those 6 things that we just saw the definitions for. We're going to look at one frame of reference for them and then how they could be reframed in order to get somebody to be more open and kind of change their way of thinking around the situation. So first is definition. So in a situation in the way it was originally seen, right? So the original frame of it is, how can we eliminate the tension between production and customer service? The reframed perspective is their tension is not a problem that can be solved. It's a dilemma that will always exist to some degree and therefore must be managed. So now we're shifting it away from, hey, how do we get rid of this thing, to moving them to a thought process of how do we manage it. History. We have always demonstrated the ability to grow, so why should it be any different now? A reframed perspective on that would be, when I look back over the past several years of the organization's performance, I don't see consistent, sustained growth. I see a few home runs that compensated for an otherwise poor track record. So again, reframing, in their minds, they're saying, oh, we've always been great. We've always grown. We've always exceeded, blah, blah, right? Now we're reframing it and saying, hey, there were some things that were done within the company that caused the company to have some, maybe some major growth spurts here and there, but there wasn't consistent growth all along. So you get somebody to see that. Now they're looking at things through a different set of glasses, basically, is how I like to look at it. Next, we have meaning. The situation as originally seen. Somebody might say, people here enjoy talking behind my back. Reframed perspective. I believe your people are expressing resistance covertly because there is a lack of synergy in the work environment. It would be an important step forward for them to feel safe in expressing their concerns overtly, right? So we're saying, hey, they're talking about you behind your back because they don't feel trust within the organization, right? And there isn't a team feeling and team environment. Next, purpose. Situation as originally seen. I can't wait until I get my hands on that guy. Reframed perspective. Given what has happened, how do you want to handle your next meeting with John? Do you want to vent your emotions, like anger, blame, etc., or solve the issue? So now you're getting them to move away from, I'm so angry, I want to, strangle this person, to, hey, you know what? We really need to focus on solving the problem. Next, we have expectations. Situation as originally seen would be, why would we want to alter our course now when profits are higher than ever? The reframed perspective is, although margins are high now, if the market continues on its present path, you're going to face the probability of a major erosion of profits in the next 18 months. So now we've moved this person from thinking everything is hunky-dory to understanding that there could be an issue if we don't look at making some changes now. Lost my slide. Where am I? Here we go. All right, so next, this is our last one out of our 6, is requirements. Situation as originally seen. I can't afford to confront her with this problem. She might get so angry that she would quit, and then what would I do about her projects? Reframed perspective would be, I understand how difficult it is for you to talk to her. Without doing so, however, your objective of resolving the problem will not be met. Failing to discuss the situation with her may result in the problem never being resolved. This would mean you would continue to have the kind of low productivity you now have as a result of her operating as she does. What it really boils down to is, how badly do you want to fix the problem? Are you willing and able to pay the price to achieve what you say you want? So again, we're reframing the situation, right? So this person, let's assume this is a manager, is saying, hey, I can't confront this person because she might quit and I really need her. Where really it should be, you know what? You can't not confront her, right? Like, you've got to fix this problem because it's only going to continue to get worse and you're going to continue to pay a price that you don't want to pay and be frustrated. So again, it's about changing. It's not changing the person's mind, right? You're not trying to, there isn't anything here about trying to change their mind to something else. It's changing their frame of reference to look at something differently. That's what you're doing with this. While an individual's frame of reference provides the context in which they make sense of situations, the day-to-day choices that create genuine organizational shifts are made on the basis of the priorities that an individual holds. These priorities are what guide specific behavioral choices. So now we're looking at the ability to reset the person's priorities. That's supposed to say reset the person's priorities. Priorities can take the form of values, relatively enduring judgments about what is good, true, and important. An individual who values harmony, for instance, will make a very different choice when facing an interpersonal conflict than a person that values candor. Priorities can also be much more situation-centric in the form of specific goals an individual wants to achieve. An individual who has set a goal of selling 10 insurance policies each day is likely to behave differently on a call with a new prospect than an individual that has set a goal to develop a strong relationship with each customer contacted, right? They both are going to sell insurance policies, but one person's focus is on sell, right? Like that is my ultimate goal. And the other person's ultimate goal is to develop a strong relationship. So they're not, while their job per se is to make sales, their focus is on building a relationship with the person rather than selling the person. So not saying that either one of those is wrong, just that one person's perspective is one thing and the other is something else. If the values or goals individuals embrace are not aligned with those needed for successful change, part of the process of reshaping their mindset is to guide them toward priorities that are more consistent with what's needed. Goals are extremely powerful drivers of behavior. They're also relatively easy to shift compared to, encouraging people to change something about their values. In some cases, an individual has not set clear goals. Under those circumstances, the appropriate action might be to work with him or her to establish specific desired results and ensure that meaningful rewards are linked to the person's achievement. In other situations, an individual may have goals that are counterproductive to realizing change. Here, the appropriate action could be to identify goals that will be more effective in reaching the change and ensure that appropriate positive and negative consequences are linked to achievement or non-achievement of the goals. Fostering a shift in values is much more challenging. Values are deeply held and are often the product of life experiences and entrenched emotional reactions as well as conscious reflection. Values are viewed as positive by the people who hold them, and attempts to shift them can be seen as intrusive, resulting in only more entrenchment. However, there are 3 steps we can take to encourage people to re-examine their values to see if they still fit current reality. Be clear about the values that the organization judges to be most important to achieving its desired change. Ask individuals to reflect on the values they hold that might have a bearing on the way they relate to the change at hand. Help people understand the implications of choosing one set of values over another in terms of personal and organizational outcomes. For instance, a person may be able to see through reflection that he or she has valued short-term gratification more highly than longer-term benefits. The person may then see that the second value, more self-disciplined thinking, is an advantage and choose to make a shift. This in turn could possibly lead to a new view on the situation, meaning a new frame of reference, and ultimately different behavioral choices in new situations. The bottom line is that shifting priorities at the goal level is much easier than trying to influence some new aspect of a person's values. In this regard, the more a person's resistance is due to value conflicts instead of goal conflicts, the more likely it is that he or she is going to remain, completely entrenched in a negative view of the change. So, a lot more challenging to try to make a shift in someone's values. So, I recommend that you try the other way first. Reframing skill number 4 is the ability to respond appropriately based on the person's reaction. The disruptive nature of major change produces a crisis in the sense that the status quo is no longer viable, right? So that happens a lot. People feel like it's a crisis when there's a change. The Chinese express the concept of crisis with 2 symbols, and you see those here on the screen. I'm displaying that. The top symbol represents potential danger. The lower, hidden opportunity. By combining the 2, the Chinese position changes as a paradox. Observing how people respond to the stress produced by the crisis of change reveals 2 basic orientations that reflect similar characteristics. Some react to reframing attempts with an opportunity orientation, a type O in other words. Others react with a danger orientation, a type D. Each of these reactions requires a different response from the change practitioner, meaning you. Creating profiles for D-type and O-type orientations to change is a useful tool for practitioners, but it comes with a risk of stereotyping that we have to be careful to avoid. As you review the following descriptions, keep in mind 2 important implications. When people resist your attempts to reframe them regarding a particular situation, it doesn't necessarily mean the following characterizations apply, the things I'm going to go over. The descriptions below reflect patterns of responses, not isolated reactions to specific situations. Sometimes O-type people resist efforts to reframe them, and sometimes D-types are amenable to shifting their perspective. A person who displays a few of the distinctions for type D or type O people doesn't necessarily fit the entire profile. We can't extrapolate a few descriptors that seem to fit and assume a person will demonstrate all the characteristics. With these cautions in place, let's explore the 2 basic orientations people demonstrate when facing significant change. Type D people view the crisis of change as threatening and often feel victimized by it. As a result, they find it difficult to reorient themselves when their expectations are disrupted. They tend to see life in either or sequential terms, thinking that change should progress in an orderly, predictable fashion. Since the world rarely offers major change in such a simple package, a type D's low tolerance for ambiguity can become a source of heightened anxiety, and that can cause you problems on your projects if you don't understand what's going on. For them, change is not natural, needed, or pleasant. So these are people that do not like change. During turbulent times, danger-oriented people often feel insecure about themselves and their ability to manage their surroundings. They're usually unaware of the dynamics associated with human transitions, tend to see the unfolding of change as unpredictable, and think they have little chance of influencing the outcomes. This can make them defensive against what appears to be mysterious, random, emotional reactions to disruption. Type D people can be slow to acknowledge the need for change. Listed below are 3 common defenses they use. The first is denial. I don't see anything that would suggest a change in our planned course, right? They're saying there's no reason for change. We don't need to do that. Distortion. Well, the data doesn't look that bad to me, right? They're saying, it's a little bad, but not bad enough for us to change. Delusion. All this talk of transformation is nothing but hot air. We don't have to worry so much. What has worked for us in the past is still viable. So these are the 3 ways that you can see that somebody might be a type D person, right? If you're hearing comments like this or seeing them react in these ways. When faced with change, type D people they're really more often than not reactive, right? Instead of proactive. They tend to dodge the forces of change in themselves and others as long as they possibly can. When they can no longer avoid it, they have too little time to plan a sound response. This leaves them with only basically their knee-jerk reactions to protect themselves or their families, friends, companies, industries, countries, whatever it is, against the new requirements for success. Type D people can spend much of their time blaming someone or something for the problems that they experience during change. This behavior inhibits problem solving, demoralizes others, and it's really counterproductive. Blaming and attacking typically result in counter-blaming and attacking by others. The energy that should go toward addressing the transition is spent instead on scapegoating, face-saving, and CYA activity. And that usually only results in more headaches and increased anxiety and hostility, which you do not want on your projects. Many type D people feel robbed of stability. They feel like in the past, the rate of change was less and they enjoyed more of a sense of peace and security. And the changes they did face were more isolated and evolutionary in nature. The impact was less disruptive and easier to contend with. Now their world has become chaotic and they experience gaping holes in their defenses against the stress, ambiguity, conflict, and the imbalance brought on by change. As the reality of change crashes in on them, they feel more and more overwhelmed. They experience their lives as unpredictable, confusing, even contradictory. They see that their previously adequate responses to events and issues isn't working anymore. They apply all the skill and knowledge that has, brought them successes before in the past, and yet now it yields failure, humiliation, maybe even defeat. A type D response to the crisis of change is heavily influenced by a person's understanding of change and his or her available resources to assimilate the change. It has very little to do with the person's age, right? You can have the same reaction whether you're 5, 10, 20, 30, or 50, 70. So the type D approach to change is by no means limited to other people or even the soon to retire, right? A lot of people think that older people are the ones that are resistant to change. Unfortunately, many young people today are type D oriented. It may not be apparent because their baseline of change expectation is higher than those with more years of experience. Nonetheless, when young people exceed their threshold for absorbing disruption, they can display the same symptoms of future shock as anyone else. The type D orientation to change is not limited to individuals. It can also be seen in family relations, group dynamics, church politics, community relations. It's found in management teams, organizational cultures, industry attitudes, and national biases. Wherever it is manifested, it significantly curbs people's abilities to manage transitions for themselves and others. You can see entire companies that are unwilling to change and are going to basically go down and become extinct because they weren't willing to change. So it's not just individuals that get affected by that. Opportunity-oriented or type O people respond to the crisis of change in a dramatically different way. While seeing the dangers, they also view change as a potential advantage to be exploited rather than a problem to be avoided. Type O people usually have a strong life vision that serves as a source of meaning, a beacon guiding them through the turmoil of change. When the unexpected throws them off course, they're able to regain their bearings by realigning with their sense of purpose. Their vision functions as a template they lay on top of the ambiguities that arise, allowing them to stay on their charted course. Type O people view life as a set of constantly shifting, interacting parts that produce an ever-rising number of combinations. Each day, Type O people assume that a new set of opportunities will emerge that will produce even more demanding challenges. I am a Type O person. I will tell you, I thrive on change. I love change. I want more change all the time. So I definitely fall in that Type O category. When disruption occurs, these people, the Type O people, experience the same disorientation, right? But they feel less need to be to defend against what's happening. They view disruption and its discomforts as a required, sometimes maybe unpleasant part of life. They develop creative ways to manage the implications rather than waste their resources trying to avoid them. So, for example, Type O people tend to compartmentalize the stress caused by change. So by doing that, they're able to contain the strain that they may be feeling in one area of their lives. They prevent it from causing ramifications in another area. It's not unusual for Type O people to isolate the anger and frustration that they have felt toward a particular group in the office. They resist aiming these emotions toward other work groups during the day or family members in the evening, right? They don't put it out there on other people. Type O people thereby avoid the drain on resources that would result from escalating problems in other areas of their lives. So they're not, if somebody at work ticks them off, basically, right, they're not going to go home and take it out on their spouse or significant other, right? Or sometimes Type D people, that happens with not because they're trying or want to take it out on the other person, but because they're allowing that problem to affect all the areas of their lives, where the Type O people have a tendency to do a better job of being able to, compartmentalize it so they can say, okay, this is only happening here. It doesn't affect these other, 10 areas of my life. Type O people protect their ability to adapt by not engaging in change efforts that require resources they don't have. They know the limits of their personal and organizational means and don't waste their time, money, or political capital pursuing endeavors that cannot be properly supported. While they are cautious about overextension, they are typically creative about using the resources they do have, thus stretching them to their maximum utilization. They constantly challenge their own assumptions about how something can be done with what they have. Type O people are also aware of their limits of their capacity to absorb change. Change resources have to do with things like time, money, and political capital. Change capacity has to do with how much transition a person can absorb before experiencing basically future shocks and symptoms, meaning the inability to maintain productivity, quality, and safety standards. Recalibrating expectations to adapt to change requires intellectual, emotional, and physical energy. When more of this recalibration is called for than people have the capacity for, then they're likely going to start displaying evidence of future shock, right? They're going to just kind of stop working, or their productivity is going to get really low. I know that for me, sometimes when I reach that point, I get exhausted and I can do nothing but go take a nap. I have to sleep. And I know that when I get to feeling like that, it's that sign that I've met my capacity to absorb change. However, type O people know when to ask for help. People with this kind of reaction are often independent and self-sufficient, yet they know when to tap the special skills of those around them to achieve common change goals. In this way, they conserve both resources and their own capacity to absorb change. Type O people also rely on nurturing relationships to help them bounce back from the strain of change. Such ties really provide a safe haven, if you will, where acceptance can revive their energy and help them regain perspective. For some people, their families, close professional colleagues, or friends provide that nurturing. Others find sanctuary in religious or even support groups. An obvious ability of type O people is their acceptance of change as a natural part of life. Type D people don't expect that significant change will be an aspect of their lives. Therefore, they are disrupted when fate hands them a surprise, right? They're not expecting change and they're surprised by it. The type O group avoids some of this dismay because change does not surprise them. They never assume that their world is going to remain unchanged. They view change, even major change, as an inherent part of existence. They also do not feel that life will unfold in a logical, easily rationalized manner with clear-cut right or wrong options. Instead, they expect to be confronted with confusing mixed signals that must be decoded and acted upon. They're better equipped to act in these kinds of situations because they understand the ever-shifting nature of the world. They see the paradox that so often lies below the surface of what might otherwise appear to be a situation filled with contradiction. Type O people recognize many ways to achieve balance in their lives. They find opportunities hidden within dangers, see humor in serious situations, find order embedded in chaos, show the patience required in urgent circumstances, make the necessary shifts so things can remain the same, find the constancy that exists within a transition, and they strive toward perfection while accepting its impossibility. The type O ability to respond in a positive way to change does not occur because of any special immunity. These people are as vulnerable to discomforts of confusion, anxiety, and stress as the type D people. The main difference between the two groups is not the feelings of discomfort caused by change, because both of them have those emotions. Their reactions to these feelings are what's different. Type D people tend to become immobilized and react with fear, denial, or complacency. Type O people recognize the discomfort as a signal to start adapting to the shifting circumstances. Type O people are therefore quicker to determine that a change is certain, needed, or advantageous. They usually move to a problem-solving mode relatively quickly. Type O people don't waste much energy blaming others for the unexpected. They merge what they have learned from the disruption to a fresh understanding of the situation. As solutions form, stability and productivity return. Of course, it's only a matter of time until the disruption of another change alters expectations, and the process begins again. BA practitioners must be able to recognize whether a person is displaying type D or type O characteristics and respond accordingly to them. Again, remember, you're not trying to change somebody, but you are trying to be able to respond based on what you know about them and their personality. So in order to be able to do that, you've got to start paying attention to those things about those other people. For many change facilitators, this final skill is the most difficult part of the reframing process. We're talking here about the willingness to confront. Being direct and explicit with other people by challenging their way of looking at the world is risky, both personally and professionally. People can get trapped in their existing perspectives and lose their ability to adapt to important changes. Most people tend to believe only what they see, but see only what they believe exists. Sometimes the only way to affect movement from the status quo is to confront people with the true price for what is required to accomplish the desired outcome. This is not meant to be argumentative or insulting. When associated with reframing people, confronting means putting a mirror up so that they can see and face the implications of their current mindset. It doesn't mean being argumentative. So here's an example. I understand how you view the situation, and I can see how it has led you to have the priorities you do, take certain positions, and do the things you do. That said, the current course you are on will lead to consequences that I don't think are in your best interest. The same situation, however, viewed differently, could provide some alternatives that may work more in your favor. If you keep your present mindset, you will probably not solve the problem or leverage the opportunity the way you ultimately want. You'll need a different perspective to accomplish what you want. I know it's difficult to redefine your view of things, but I believe it's important to try because I honestly believe you will not be satisfied with the result otherwise. The confrontational aspect of reframing means we care enough about the individual to be brutally honest about the downside of their current perspective and to offer an alternative view. So we are not trying to beat them up. We're not trying to make them look foolish. We're not trying to bully them into doing things our way. That is not the point, right? It's caring and wanting to get them to see an alternative view. Reframing is the process of integrating the 5 skills that we've covered here. In phase 1, the practitioner identifies the other person's mindset. This step provides a basis for understanding the person's existing context or code book for interpreting a given change situation. Strong communication and active listening skills are critical to the success of this phase. In phase 2, the practitioner follows certain specific steps to help create an alternative frame of reference so the person can interpret the situation in a manner more amenable to a successful outcome. The ability to legitimize the person's current viewpoint, offer an alternative perspective, and be honest about the price for success is critical to the achievement of that phase. In phase 3, the practitioner helps reset new priorities based on the new frame of reference. In phase 4, the practitioner must be prepared to respond appropriately to the person's reaction when the recommended new frame of reference and priorities are offered. Professional facilitators of organizational change must be able to influence those that they serve. This includes you, right? You are a professional facilitator of organizational change. That's what VAs are. Sponsors, stakeholders, agents, targets, and advocates are some of those people that you would serve. Of particular importance is your ability to guide sponsors. I'm getting a message here that says I lost connection, but it looks like I'm still connected. Okay. Of particular importance is their ability to guide sponsors. There are times when this kind of influence takes the form of reshaping others' views as well as their interpretation of a situation in order to alter their natural tendencies. There are many perspectives on this important part of practicing our craft as BAs, and I would invite you to share other approaches that you rely on that have worked well for you, and even things that haven't worked well so that we can all learn from them. You are more than welcome to send me some things in email if you have some approaches to share. And I'd like to find out if anybody on the call has any questions at this point. I know that that was a lot to go over. You are going to get these slides and the recordings, so you can kind of reabsorb it again. But the point that I really want to make here is that mindset and other people's frame of reference is something that you've got to take into consideration when you are talking to them about requirements and when you are discussing organizational change, right? And you've got to be able to understand why some people are fighting against change and why other people are embracing change. And sometimes even the people that embrace change, quite frankly, embrace too much change, right? They're too willing sometimes to change. So you might think you always want people that are that always want to change, but I do think that having people with both of those perspectives on a project is good, because you get the different, you get that different perspective that you can see on the project from each point of view. But you also need to make sure that what needs to happen for the project can happen. That on neither side, whether somebody's a type O or a type D, what really matters at the end of the day is that we're moving forward, making progress, and we're in line with what we're supposed to be achieving for the project. And the best way for you to be able to do that, of course, is to understand some things around people's mindset and be able to make sure that you're taking those things into consideration when you're communicating with them so that you frame things the right way for them. It's not their job to interpret from you. It's your job to see how they prefer to receive information and for you to be able to communicate that way to them.